We've just had a rather spontaneous idea. Let's head to the church and make a quick video. And we were so spontaneous we forgot to pack all our stuff. So it's going to be an iPhone only video today. We've got no microphone for me here, and we've got no microphones for the organ, so it's all from the iPhone today. So please excuse the audio quality for today, but more on that subject in the video itself. Good afternoon and a happy Easter to everybody. All the Easter, I'm not going to say Easter chaos, it's the wrong word, but all the chaos of Easter services, etc. is now over. It's actually Easter Monday today, and I'm just spending even more time at the organ. I'm doing a spot of practicing actually, and I thought we'd do something rather different today. We're going to do sort of a question and answer session. A lot of people have been asking questions and been sending me emails or in the comments under the videos asking all sorts of questions, varying from personal questions to professional questions to organ questions to musical questions and things. And I thought, well, rather than answer them all individually, I'd put sort of a few of them together in a video and we'd talk about that today. That was my plan. So there will be some music in between, don't worry about that, but it's going to be a bit of a question and answer session today. Now, while we're on the subject of talking, a couple of comments in the recent weeks have been there to say, you talk a lot and don't play enough. Well, that's kind of the point of this channel. It's about organs and organ music, and well, we'll eventually get onto other kinds of music at some point. I say there's plenty to talk about in the organ world, but hey, there's an awful lot more music out there that we can cover as well. And the idea is that I'm trying to introduce the YouTube world to a different side of organ music. There are hundreds of other organ-related channels there who just present organ music, and that's fine. They are absolutely wonderful. There are some very professional players out there. There are also some very talented amateur players out there who sit at the organ and play wonderful music and present the music. Absolutely fine. I don't want to copy that. I want to sort of talk to you about the organ world and tell you what's going on in this crazy world. And yeah, so if this is too much talk for you, then go and find another channel. No, I didn't mean it as bad as that, of course, but I actually hope you can maybe take something else from this channel. So if you expect just organ music, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to go and look somewhere else. We're talking about the organ in this channel. I hope that's all right. Okay. Here's a basic question. A lot of people have asked this over the past few months. Who am I? Well, as the title of the channel might suggest, my name is actually Fraser Gartshore. That's who I am. And I'm currently 46 years of age, and I live in Germany, but I'm not German, at least not originally. I'm from Scotland. I was born in Inverness in the north of Scotland, the capital of the Highlands, a few miles from Loch Ness. Everybody knows Loch Ness. That's where I'm originally from, and in the year 2000 I moved to Germany. We'll talk about that later. I went to school in Inverness. I started playing the piano as a very young child in Inverness. I also started learning the organ in Inverness, but something came in between. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I was a singer in the Inverness Cathedral choir, which at the time was a male voices only choir. As far as I know, it's now a mixed choir with boys and girls, and then men singing the lower voices. As far as I know, don't quote me on that. I've been away for a very, very long time, so I assume it's changed. I had heard it had changed. So anyway, so my origins are in Scotland, and that's also where I studied music. In 1990, I moved to Edinburgh to study music at the University of Edinburgh, and I sort of had a little break in the middle. If any of my old professors are watching this, they're going to start laughing now. I wasn't the most conscientious student of music, shall we put it like that? With hindsight, I would probably have been better off if I went to maybe a music academy I also applied to go to the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, which was in Glasgow. I also applied to them, but I turned them down. I got an offer from them, but I turned it down, and I decided instead to go to Edinburgh to study music. I actually had an offer to go to Cambridge to study music as well, but for some reason I decided not to go there. I wanted to go to Edinburgh. I think it was because I was only 17 when I started studying. I was one of those early birds, and I think I just didn't want to be too far away from home at the time. So with hindsight, I should probably have studied more practical music rather than academic music. I'm not a very academic person, really. I love the ins and outs of music, and now I realize that I maybe should have paid more attention when I was studying then. Anyway, so in the middle of my student break, I decided, no, I need to finish my degree, and the profs at Edinburgh were very kind and let me come back, and I didn't have to do the whole course again. I got to do the final 2 years, and then I had my music degree. And that was 1998. 2 years later, I moved to Germany. So before we move on to the German side of things, let's backtrack a little bit. I started playing the piano when I was very, very young. My parents, I'm not actually sure why we decided to get a piano at home. Presumably, I must have shown some kind of interest at some point. My parents bought a piano, and my great uncle George, who was actually a butcher by trade, was actually a very, very talented jazz piano player. And Uncle George taught me a few of the basics, and I started taking piano lessons. I actually still have my very first notebooks of when I learnt to play the piano. I found them not that long ago, actually. If I dig them up when I go home, I'll put a little cutout video of my first notebooks when I started playing the piano. Yeah, that was a very, very long time ago, back in the 70s. And at some point, I sort of fell in love with the world of the organ, but not church organs. My parents had an old 45 record of a Belgian Hammond organist called André Brasseur. And it was a little 45 single of André Brasseur's that got me into this got me interested in the organ sound. And the record in question, on the one side it had Holiday, and on the other side it had The Kid. And I listened to that constantly, and I think it said André Brasseur and his magical organ, or something along those lines. I must see if I can find it. And his magical organ. And I thought, as a young kid, I actually thought that all the sounds on that record were the organ. It was an electronic organ making all those sounds. Of course it wasn't. It was André Brasseur playing a Hammond organ, and he had a drummer and a bassist and a guitarist and a piano player and everything else around it, a whole band around him. But I thought he was just making all this music on the organ. So at some point I was fascinated by this, and my parents then had the idea, well, why don't we buy one of those Yamaha organs for the home? And we had for a while a Yamaha Electone organ. And that was my first physical organ experience. A little two short manuals and just one octave of pedals at the bottom. That was my first organ. And I loved that instrument. And I played everything on that. I played classical music on it. I fell in love with the music of the Beatles while I was doing that. I fell in love with jazz music when I was doing that, etc., etc. I absolutely loved that instrument. And that sparked my interest in the organ world. So, moving forward a few years, I was on holiday with, I was on holiday with my grandmother, and we were in Blackpool, which is, for those of you who aren't from Britain, that's sort of a seaside resort where a lot of British families and people used to go in the summertime. I think it's probably still the same, although I think Blackpool's more of a sort of a drinking holiday centre these days. Apologies if it's not, or if you're one of the people who loves going to Blackpool for different reasons. But anyway, Blackpool is also famous, that's what I wanted to say, for the theatre organ, or cinema organ, as it's known in other parts of the world. And in the Blackpool Tower Ballroom, there is a very famous Wurlitzer theatre organ. And I was completely and utterly hooked by the sound of this instrument, and that got me going on that side of things. So actually, before I even started thinking about church organs, I was playing electronic organs and theatre organs. So, of course, in the north of Scotland, there weren't any theatre organs. That's not quite true. In Aberdeen, which is east of Inverness, on the east coast, there used to be, I think it's still there, but I'm not sure it's playable anymore, still in situ in a cinema, there was an old Compton theatre organ. And as a very young man, I think I was probably only 13 or 14, I went through to Aberdeen on the train all by myself to meet the guy who was in charge of the organ and to get to play it. And that was the first time I ever played a pipe organ in my entire life. It was a theatre organ, a cinema organ in Aberdeen, and that's where it all started. Back to the organ world. And when did the classical stuff start? Well, as I already mentioned, I was kind of involved in Inverness Cathedral music, and that's where I started playing the classical organ. My organ teacher was the then organist at Inverness Cathedral, and he taught me the basics. We started with sort of the what are they called, 8 easy preludes and fugues by Bach, and then moved up gradually through the works. And a few years later, as I said, I went off to Edinburgh to study, and I had a variety of organ teachers when I was in Edinburgh. And like I also said, while I was at Edinburgh, I wasn't the most conscientious of students. I was more interested in other kinds of music, and I was traveling around, quite secretly actually, traveling around the country, playing all sorts of music with all sorts of different people, more sort of jazz, blues, rock and roll, pop music and things like that. And I was being quite secretive about it at the time because there were rather sort of famous people involved, but I'm not going to talk about that. That's a story for another day. And then, like I said, in 2000, all of my British activities stopped and I decided to move to Germany. Why did I move to Germany? Well, my partner at the time was offered a job in Germany, and she was German, and she suggested, why don't you come with me? Maybe there's something musical you can do in Germany. I didn't speak a word of German. So at the beginning of 2000, we upped sticks and moved to Bonn, which was not anymore the capital of Germany, but had just lost its sort of status as capital city. That all moved back to Berlin. And yeah, and in Bonn, that's where I discovered St. Joseph, the church we saw a couple of weeks ago, the French sensation in Bonn. And yeah, that of course immediately sort of solidified my relationship with organ music, having moved to Germany. Now, I did continue with the sort of rock and roll and blues and jazz stuff that I was doing, and I still sometimes do that as well, not as much anymore. I spent a good few years playing in a classic jazz band. I like to call it classic jazz and not Dixie jazz. Dixie sounds so cheap, but it was a classic jazz band, and I spent years traveling Europe with one of those bands as well. But of course I always came back to the organ music, and I got connected with an English-speaking choir, and I got connected with German-speaking choirs, church choirs. Completely different tradition to the one I was used to in the UK. That took quite a while to get used to. But yeah, I've now been in Germany for about 19 or almost 20 years now. This is my 20th year in Germany. And this position that I have now, where I am organist in Herschbach, and I have a choir in Herschbach and 2 other church choirs that belong to this parish. I also have a male vocal group, and what else do I have? What else do I have? I think that's it actually at the moment. There were more before, but I've given up on some because it takes up too much time and you get completely mixed. Yeah, if you've got 3, 4 different vocal groups, you know, you can't really do the same program with all of them. So you've got to split up a little bit. So anyway, a few people ask me what is actually my job. So by the way, I am actually answering questions here. I'm just turning it all into a big story. I hope that's okay. So yeah, some people have been asking, what is my job? So part of it is this, playing the organ for services. Another part of it is conducting choirs, connected with this church, also for services. And then I actually have a sort of a day job as well. It's I'm a freelance translator for a company in Munich, and I've been doing that for a good few years now, and that's sort of a little sort of side income as well, which is rather useful to have, shall we say. So that's that. Have I always been a musician, was one of the questions that was asked. Yes, I have, but I have tried other things just to see if I like it. You know what it's like? You say to your parents, I want to be a musician, and your parents will 99% of the time say, oh, are you sure? Why not do something more sensible? Well, my parents thankfully didn't do that. They said, you do what you want. And I'm very grateful to them for letting me basically do what I want. I've always basically done what I wanted. But there have been other people in my life who have suggested, are you sure you should be a musician? You want to be a musician? And I've tried other things just to see if that is my lifestyle. And I can quite happily tell you it's not. I was definitely born to do what I do now. I have never been happier. This is what I do from here, and also from my stomach, and also with my brain. So it's, yeah, I have basically always been a musician. I have tried other things, and I've pretty much always hated it, to be honest. And I'm very lucky now. My current partner, she allows me to do anything I want in the world of music, which is absolutely wonderful. She supports me 100% with this YouTube stuff. A couple of years ago I said, you know, we really need to start this, and other people were saying, come on, you're too old for YouTube, no one's interested in that. And since for the last few months we've been doing this together, and it's become a great success, and we both love doing it. So she refuses to show herself in front of the camera. She wants to stay behind the camera. I'm looking at her just now, and she says no. Okay, she refuses to be shown. There is a video where you got to see her shoes, and I think that's probably all you're going to see of her in the future. Is that right? She says yes. Okay, so we're going to keep that a secret for now. But yes, that is my other half, my better half, my darling wife. She is the one behind the camera, pointing it at me and waving at me when she has to hold it for too long, and we have to pause so that she can wave her hands about a bit, get some blood back in her arms, which I think we need to do now. Organic boogie woogie. two final questions. What are my plans for the future? Well, my plans for the future, or shall we say our plans for the future, because we've been talking about this for the past months. Our plans for the future are definitely to carry on with everything we're doing up to now, and to increase, of course, the popularity of this YouTube channel about organs and organ music. It seems to be going down very well. We've got pretty much 12,000 subscribers now, which is unbelievable. And as I've said in other videos, I never expected us to get this far, this fast. And it's been rather wonderful that it has happened like this. So thank you for your support. And while we're on the subject of support, there is, of course, our little links below to Patreon. Thank you to the new patrons who joined this week. I have written to you, and I will be writing to you again very shortly after Easter, because we need to start talking about benefits that I promised you, and they will be coming. The same applies to steady memberships. We now have, I think we now have almost 20, or maybe over 20 steady memberships, which is rather wonderful. And also you also have benefits promised as well, and they will be coming very soon as well. It's all happened so fast, we're sort of trying to keep ahead of ourselves. It's almost impossible. And then, of course, there's also the PayPal Me link for people who might just want to sponsor the channel one-off. That's also coming along rather nicely. Thank you very much indeed. Our microphone solution for recordings is almost cleared up. I hope in the next couple of weeks you will get to hear the first results of our new setup, once it's ordered and once it's there. So I'm rather excited to present that. So thank you very much for your help there. Yeah, what are our plans? Some people have been asking me personal questions. What are your hobbies and interests, they have said. Well, apart from gardening, you may have noticed I'm a bit sunburnt today. We were sort of playing around in the garden before we came here. It's very hot and sunny this year in Easter. I think it's a global warming Easter, so thank you for global warming. It's become rather lovely. I love the sun. Living in Scotland for 27 years of your life is definitely not good for sunshine. I think I had the whitest skin of any human being before I moved to Germany, where suddenly I saw the sun for the first time and realized my skin could actually change color. That's rather interesting. Anyway, so yeah, playing around in the garden is not necessarily a hobby, but we have a nice little garden at home, and we do like doing things in it to make it look nice. But my main hobbies, well, apart from eating and drinking, which explains the big fat stomach, you don't need to zoom in on my stomach, thank you very much. Eating and drinking are definitely hobbies. I love it. Cars, automobiles, moving vehicles. Since I've been a very small boy, I have loved cars. I have owned, oh God, I have owned a lot of cars over the years. I got my license when I was 17, which is normal in the UK. And since then, I don't know, I've probably owned about 50 different cars. I've had old cars, I've had new cars, I've had fast cars, I've had slow cars, I've had fun cars, I've had dangerous cars, everything. There was a while I had quite a number of cars at the same time, which was rather expensive, and I love all things about cars. Now, maybe you've noticed this from my organ videos. I love sort of the mechanics of these instruments, as well as the instruments like piano, for example. It's all a very mechanical thing, and I love taking things to bits and putting them back together again. And I do that with all the cars that we have. When I say all the cars we have, that sounds very decadent. I've got a rather old Mercedes from the 90s that I bought for next to nothing about 10 years ago, and I have very slowly and very lazily been sort of restoring it to its former glory, and that's getting there soon. And our day-to-day driver is an old Audi estate that my missus and I drive around in. And then I also have a leasing car that I sort of use for business purposes, for business mileage, and that ends this year, this lease, so we'll see what replaces that later on in the year. Yeah, so that gave us the idea, because quite a lot of people have asked, and give us the idea, how about a second channel talking about cars? Now, there are millions of car channels on YouTube, and they all seem to have this special thing. So, you know, trying to come up with an idea of how to make something special about cars is going to be quite difficult. But a number of people have also said, well, just do what you do with organs, but with cars. Present us different cars, present us the workings of cars, how you work on cars, how you do things with cars and things like that. So what I'm going to do over the next few months, we're going to start sort of putting together a few little pilot videos, and I will post them on that channel. I'll tell you all about it when it's ready. and we'll see how it goes. Now, it won't take over from the organ channel, that's a promise, okay? Organ channel is going to be number one, and it will stay that way for the future. The organ thing will just be a sort of bit of a hobby on the side to maybe sort of try and attract a different kind of audience, and then we can try sort of mixing them together. That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? So then sort of YouTube would probably become a permanent job if both of them sort of went viral. Wouldn't that be great? Right, that's definitely enough talk from me today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sponsoring and liking and subscribing and clicking the bell and all those things that you do to help join and help make this channel more successful and more popular. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to spend the next few days once again practicing my toccata and fugue so that it's ready. I think I've found the right organ to perform it. More on that when it's the right time. But that's enough for today. See you next time. Bye bye.